About starting up a Fab Lab, a humanitarian Fab Lab in Djibouti. So it's just for fair warning, if you came for something else, please let us know or please switch now. Okay, so basically, it's very nice to meet all of you. My name's Ruta, and to be honest, I'm a humanitarian. You guys in the Fab world are beautiful, magical creatures to me, and I don't understand everything that you do technology-wise. Basically, something like a year and a half ago, an NGO called Terre des Hommes, working primarily with children, started a project to try to use Fab Labs in complex contexts to support children and youth. So the idea was to make sure that children and youth were better off because they had access to technology, machines, and they can make their own solutions. One of the first 5 or 6 Fab Labs that started up was done in Djibouti. I played a part in it, Jean-Michel played a part in it, and Enrico came to start the Fab Lab up and was there for the first session with migrant children and youth. So what we want to do is spend a little bit of time talking you through the background of the thing. So the idea is that I'll give you a little of the context, Enrico will give you a bit like what happened, how it was similar to and different from other Fab Labs, and Jean-Michel will talk a bit about the bigger resilience collective that's starting up. We don't anticipate that this will take more than half an hour, and we want most things to be focused on questions. And if you have questions during anything that we say, please stop us. Sound good? Okay, assuming silence is good.
Or will you share the slides?
I think I can do this. Let's see how this goes. All right. For me, this is a technological success. Okay. So the Fab Lab in Djibouti. So where is Djibouti and why would you want a Fab Lab there is probably the first question that some of you may be asking. So Djibouti is a very small country in East Africa. It is just north of Somalia and just east of Ethiopia. It is a very tiny country in and of itself, but it's a kind of a strategic country for migration flows. So basically, a lot of people leave, especially Ethiopia, but also Somalia, and they go through Djibouti on their way to the Middle East. So they go through Yemen and they go to get jobs in Saudi Arabia and other Gulf countries. Often the kids who go are young, so the average age is 21, 22. They haven't had much experience with technology at all. And often the work that they're going to do is not the nicest work in the world. So not only is the work itself pretty menial and basic, but they're also kind of likely to be abused by their employers or on the route. So you think about this, and then you think about Fab Labs, and you're like, great, how do the two match up? Especially given that a lot of the people who are traveling maybe aren't literate, maybe haven't seen a computer before. Why would you assume that Fab Labs can help to support them? So the idea behind this Fab Lab was basically that what kids can do in a Fab Lab is, first of all, learn about technology in a way that's hands-on. So they can see the results of technology. It's not like an abstract thing on a computer, it's a thing they can hold in their hands. The second idea is that you guys in the Fab Lab community are a network. And if you can link kids into this network, then there's a possibility of them being able to ask for help, support, and just like be in touch with people, not only in the place, like straight throughout their migration route. The first thing, getting kids in touch with technology, that's something I think we've had some success with over the course of the project. The second, the networking, that's where I think we'd really like the conversation to go at the end of the presentation. I'm trying to share my screen and I'm trying to go to the next slide. There we go. So basically, a Fab Lab was set up in the University of Djibouti. this is the University of Djibouti. The University of Djibouti is primarily for students in Djibouti who are kind of better off, who are more literate, who've gone through the system. As you can see, it's a very nice university. It's kind of pretty and open air, and it's a nice place. The Fab Lab was started there partially because it had the infrastructure to support a Fab Lab. So it had electricity, it had running water, it had all the prerequisites to allow machines to work. It also had sustainability. The university is going to be there for a long time after us. It was started by IOM, so the International Organization for Migration, which is a UN agency, TDH, which is an NGO, and the university. One of the interesting things was the process of getting kids, migrant kids, to the Fab Lab, because there's a bit of a cultural divide. So kids who are kind of not necessarily in great spots, that are staying in Djibouti to work to earn the money for the next phase of their journey, don't usually access the university. So, and a local organization called Caritas helped to identify the kids. There were kids with whom Caritas had worked for a long time, and Caritas brought the kids to the university. Okay, I'm just going to go back because I'm going to pass it over to Enrico now, I think. Does that sound good? So basically, what we did was we set up a Fab Lab that that had, I think, most of the basic machines. So computers, CNC mills, 3D printers, laser cutters, and vinyl cutters. And we taught, well, basically, there's a manager in the Fab Lab in Djibouti who already has a lot of skills, both technically and with kids, who is basically running the Fab Lab and making sure that it continues. I think now would be a good time to hand over to Enrico so that he can kind of talk us through stuff.
Can you hear me? Cool, okay. So it's really good to see you all. It's nice to see so many faces that I haven't had the chance to chat with since last year. So the experience in Djibouti, I think that I can talk mainly what was interesting and strong and strange for a maker to be there, besides the setting up of the machine. So in this kind of context, what I noticed is that things that can be very easy to solve in Italy or in our Fab Labs could be tricky. So from tools that are not so easily available to materials that are not commonly available. So MDF, for instance, that seems to be the most standard thing in the world to make the bed for the milling machine was something that we were not capable of finding in time, as well as some connection, electrical plugs or cables, electrical screwdrivers. So at a certain point, we had to go and shop for these things because even inside the university, people that owns the tool or that they use the tool, they are pretty jealous of those tools. So there are some delays that needs to be considered in some environments, as well as moving around. We've been very kindly brought wherever we had to go. But of course it takes time. So when you plan activities, that was a mental note that I took for myself in case another situation like this would happen. It's good to have multiple activities that you can do. And if you're late for something, you can work on something else. So this was the, let's say, unusual part in setting up the lab. I helped to set up 3 labs in my life in Italy where I worked, and helped others to set up their own. And in this case, these kind of tiny delays and difficulties could be tricky when you have a limited amount of time. So we've been there basically less than a week. And the idea was to run also the first workshop, the first test with the students. So it became a bit tricky with some delays, and that wasn't something I expected at the beginning. So it's been helpful to be a bit flexible and work around these tiny obstacles. But the first workshop we did was amazing. So the response of the people is just beautiful. It's interesting to see how the social dynamics of the group of the migrants we worked with. Oops, can you hear me? Yeah, okay. So the migrants we worked with had social dynamics that were pretty similar to the kids we work with in Italy. So some were very enthusiastic about it, some wanted to prove that they were the leaders of the group in a positive way, some others in a less positive way. But technology and the magic of being capable of making something is really catchy. So at the beginning we were thinking, at least I was thinking, it could have been useful to make some specific tools, and I was thinking about complex applications. But one of the most successful things was inspired by Game of Thrones. So it's an activity that Beyleh did a month or so after, 3D scanning the faces of the students that were passing by and making a wall with all the faces, like the one in Game of Thrones. And then that was very catchy. So somehow a positive side effect of globalization is that we have a very wide common background, even if it's weird to think about that. So that was another thing that I didn't expect, but it was very useful to, create a connection. Or they wanted to print a small World Cup because of football, and that was another, global things that brought people together. The first thing that we milled, that it's the one you see in the picture, is actually the name of the father, the grandfather, and a girl that was in the team. And that was a way to keep memory of her family, considering that she was traveling only with the mother and not with the rest of the family. So there were a lot of interesting aspects beside machines. As I said, we had some trouble with that, and the supply chain is much slower. So you really don't want to mess up or make mistakes or burn a fuse, because getting a fuse could, take longer than the time you have to be there. So I think that was the part of the experience that could be useful for any makers that want to help in the field. The other point, what you see these guys doing, is actually to train on basics on computer and information technologies. So some of the first exercises were not modeling something in 3D, was actually learn how to digit on a keyboard and interacting with a computer. They know what a computer is, of course, they know more or less how it works, but it was good to do some exercises for them. So this is the girl that actually was milling the name of the parents, of the father and grandfather. And they were very happy to help out to assemble the machine, or in this case, we were fixing it because it wasn't properly assembled, but they were very cooperative. The guy you see is the manager, Beyleh. Now, there are a couple of articles that I've seen, but I haven't followed the project directly, but I know that Beyleh and the team helped out with the COVID-19 crisis. So they were capable of jumping into a very important topic, producing face shields for the people.
And basically, so one of the things about COVID-19 was that it showed that the lab could be adapted. So COVID-19 happened, and then straight away, the Fab Lab manager got his network in the university, the students, the migrants, and others to start making protective equipment. And that actually got further buy-in. So the guy you see, the Fab Lab manager talking to right there, is the president of the university. The reason why that's important is because, like, for humanitarians, a lot of projects start and then just stop. Like, they just stop because they stop being useful. But the implication of this picture is that people are going to want it to go forward because they saw how useful it was in COVID-19. So that's nice for sustainability. Jean-Michel, do you want to maybe, or well, Enrico, first of all, do you want to finish? Sorry.
No, that's it. I'm happy to have a conversation on this. It was a super nice experience, and if other had any similar experience or question or doubts, even on how to do this better. I mean, it was my first experience in Africa and helping a lab that I didn't follow since the beginning. So it was definitely super cool.
We're all learning.
Should I talk a little bit about the broader perspective?
Yep.
For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jean-Michel Molenaar, and I'm, like Ruta said, one of the people who sort of helped start this up. I eventually didn't go to Djibouti myself, but I'm super happy that Enrico got to go there. I've set up Fab Labs in many places. One in Madagascar, which was a similar challenge. It was a really big challenge just to get stuff inside the country and then to find things locally. And since then, I've been in a few Fab Labs and helped create a few where I haven't been yet. But I'll talk a little bit about that. I'll just share my screen. I'm going to stop your screen then from being shared, Ruta, if you don't mind. So as a larger context, when I was working at Telezome, in the beginning, we were doing something we called the Humanitarian Fablab initiative. And from the beginning, I didn't really like the idea of calling it Humanitarian Fablabs in a way, because it was a bit restrictive. In this world, there's a lot of humanitarian work, and then there's development work, and there's also just work that we can't call humanitarian, but that's still really important to help people out. And I think that's the idea behind Fab Labs in general. And so what Ruta and I started to throw back and forth was this idea of creating something we called the Resilience Collective. And it sort of happened to then become an actual thing, and now it's alive and it's happening. And so I'm currently still working as a consultant for Telezome, but I'm also working for IOM. So I'm helping them set up a new lab in Gaziantep in Turkey. And we're really seeing that we're starting to get sort of a more active community in this. And so the idea of the Resilience Collective, it's sort of summed up in the subtitle on the website where you can go, is really a collective journey. So it's not just one organization, but multiple, to design, test, and document, and then scale the use of digital technology, not just Fab Labs, but digital technology in a wider perspective for the most vulnerable populations. Now, sadly, vulnerable populations are myriad on the planet, and they're only getting more and more. And so really what I want to stress is that this is not just one organization. The Fab Foundation has signed an MOU to work with this Telezome, who's really working on children, working on making lives of children better. There's IOM that's really working on migrants all over the world. We're working with the University of Geneva, who's trying to build a framework to do this in a better way. Maraki Lab's a company that Ruta runs. And so we're really trying to build a group, and I urge you to you know, help us out if you want, if this is something that you like, that tries to build on these experiences and build these different labs in different you know, contexts, and say, okay, what works in these contexts and what doesn't, and how can we learn from each other, very similar as we do in the Fab Lab world since, you know, many years, to make all this better. So just to briefly go over what's been established and what's going to be established, we had a lab in Greece, in Ioannina, which actually welcomed a lot of migrants as well, which was a huge success. Not in the least because we had an amazing Fab Lab manager. She did just a wonderful job, not just getting people together, but giving them the opportunity to organize stuff. And so she really, she didn't bring people the thing like, okay, come to the Fab Lab and you can make X or you can make Y. She actually really went to the communities and say, what do you guys want to do? What kind of issues do you have and what are you struggling with? And then they organize workshops themselves. There's a Fab Lab in the Fab Lab Sever. I'm just going to go stay here in Severodonetsk in the Ukraine, which is actually built in partnership with the university there. And this is also in the context of we're trying to set up Fab Labs, and we're starting to call these the Resilience Collective innovation facilities, which because it goes beyond Fab Labs in a way. But we're really trying to set them up in lots of different contexts. So as in the Ukraine, as in Djibouti, it's in a university, which gives stability because the university is there to give it, you know, a space, to give it people who can work there. But it also gives a lot of constraints we're seeing because it's often harder to get migrant populations in. It's harder to get the youth that's living on the streets in because these children often have the impression that, you know, university, it's not for them. It's not a location where they're even allowed to go. And so we're really experimenting with these different contexts. There's a lab we set up in Gaza. I'll probably show a little bit of pictures from when I've been there because it's really inspirational. Well, I'll let you go to the pages yourself if you have time later. There's a lab that's sort of still being set up, but it's happening in Moktedo in Burkina Faso, which is not extremely far from Ouagadougou, the capital, which you may have heard of because there's the Ouaga Lab from Gildas, who's very well known in the Fab Lab world. And Gildas happily partnered with us, and so he's teaching some of the young kids in Burkina Faso. To give you an idea of what we're talking about, right? Because Burkina Faso, so not all of you have been there. And so what we're talking about is locations in Moktedo where actually there's people working in what they call artisanal gold mines, right? So instead of having very nice big machines that dug up the earth and then, you know, sift it and make sure you get out the gold, there's these kids that are actually brought there and that work and that go into tunnels like this that are up to like tens of meters deep. So, you know, if you're at a house, look at the house 4 times that and then deep into the ground where they dig to get gold out, right? And then they use mercury to extract that gold from the earth. And so there's lots of health issues. There's terrible situations. But these kids do this because this is the only option, right? And so really what we're trying to do is figure out as a collective, A, does it make sense to put a Fab Lab there? And if so, what does it mean to put a Fab Lab there? What can you put there? What can't you put there, right? So we're obviously not going to ship a 40,000 euro Trotec laser cutter to a situation like that. But installing small tools, installing computers, teaching them with, for instance, Raspberry Pis about computing, about getting information from the internet, about a thing that might seem trivial, but gold prices on the market, is a huge deal, right? So we're really experimenting with very small to very big. There's a Fab Lab in Djibouti, which I've been talking about. And then there's multiple others that are going to come up. There's an effort in Hungary where we're going to build a Fab Lab for mainly youth that are incarcerated. And then there's a Fab Lab in Gaziantep in Turkey, which also has a lot of migratory situations there that IOM is building. And what really I've seen in all these labs, and I'm just going to show you some pictures from Gaza, is that wherever you are, the youth finds this amazing. So this is a few pictures of the Fab Lab in Gaza when I had the opportunity to go there. And this is Youssef, who was teaching about 3D and about modeling to these kids who were just super enthusiastic about it. And as you see in the beginning, there were a handful of these kids. And what was just amazing during the hour-long workshop, every 5 minutes there would be someone like behind the door looking through the little window of the door, and I would be close to the door and I would just discreetly let them in, because Youssef told me like, oh, we're gonna not have too many kids, so I can show you how to do it. And so at the end of the workshop, like the whole room was full and we couldn't get in more kids. And for me, it just showed like the attraction of this kind of technology and this kind of stuff, even to those who often haven't seen a computer yet, and how we can use that technology to really draw them in, and then have them talk about their issues, have them discuss their issues with peers, with others, and it really works in that context. The idea of the resilience is to do a big Fab Labs, but also to use elements. So these just video out, and then resources yet, but we're gonna get more and more of these and share those with the community. So we've had ODI do a review on youth and technology, Enrico of education, and so we'll different language, different resources available. And there's not that much for now. We're working on doing more and creating a stable organization that can work with all these other organizations to do this kind of great work, like Enrico did in Djibouti. Yeah, I think I'm going to stop there, because I can talk forever about this. As Ruta said, yeah, it's about a half an hour. As Ruta said in the beginning, we're doing this and we have a lot of locations open, but there's still lots of questions. We still have a lot of things that we don't yet really know how to do it well. And certainly one of the things is how to properly engage with the other Fab Labs as a community. So how do we not just pull people in to maybe go to these spaces to help out in the location itself, but how do we pull people in to help us with the research, help us define what kind of tools could be relevant for the different locations? Because as I think you all agree, shipping extremely expensive tools to places where they have almost nothing makes no sense, but slowly increasing the capability they have locally of fabricating things until maybe it does make sense to ship them a 50,000 euro shopbot. I see Bill Young in the group. Why not? We have to start small, and we can eventually ramp up to really give these people the means of becoming more resilient as an individual, and then because of that as a community. Ruta and Enrico, if you want to add something, otherwise we can open it up for questions. I think everyone can just unmute and shout out what you want to shout. And if you unmute, do tell us who you are. And if you want to mute your video, it's cool to see folks.
Yeah, no, pretty much the one thing I have to add is just like, I think the Fab Lab community as a whole has a lot to give the kind of work that we do. So I'm obviously coming at it from the point of view of a very different community. So to watch people actually kind of develop solutions for themselves, build something for themselves, get engaged with something in a way that's a bit longer term is something that, like, I can tell you we need more of it. So if you guys want to or can help, it would be greatly appreciated. So yeah.
Is such a Fab Lab meant to be permanent, or is it a temporary action?
So one of the reasons why we put the Fab Lab in the university is because we don't want it to be temporary. So the university has independent resources to keep the Fab Lab operational. And that's also why it's important for us that other stakeholders like government actors and stuff like that see it as being useful. So it is permanent and it's not just a 3-month patch.
Yeah.
As a note, obviously the goal is to always make them permanent. But in humanitarian development world, we often depend on funding that is temporary. And so the funding ends, and if it ends, then it's gone, and we don't always know how to follow up or how to continue. But I'll give you an example that I've seen happen in Gaza, because for a while in Gaza, we didn't have funding anymore for the Fab Lab, so it had to close. But Youssef, our Fab Lab manager, he actually got to learn how to build his own machine. So he built his own 3D printers, he built his own stuff. And he still sends me pictures over WhatsApp regularly. And he recently finished his first, I think it's 1.5 by 4 meter ShopBot-like CNC mill that he's putting in a workshop that's open for people. So maybe the Fab Lab we started had to sort of close, but the spirit's there and it's continuing in that sense. You see what I mean, Peter?
Yeah, but I was wondering, as your organization is funding it initially, I think, the Fab Lab, or?
So the current spaces that have been opened were funded by Terre des Hommes, by IOM, and some smaller chunks.
But whatever happens, the machines will not be sent back to where they came from. They stay there.
Yes.
That is, okay. Yeah. I know some funders who can do that. Another question. Can I ask another question? What is happening with the children? Are they just visitors, or do you keep track of them individually? What they are doing there, what they have learned? Do they have a learning passport or whatever? Is there some administration behind to see whether they make some progress?
So that's an interesting one. Basically, so over the last year and a half, different Fab Labs have taken different approaches. So the Fab Lab in Greece, for instance, just supported children as they came in. The Fab Lab in Djibouti is more focused on one cohort of children. So basically we've had a mix. The aim is to move towards giving kids a menu that they can choose from and trying to achieve more concrete learning outcomes. Yes. In order to do that, so we can do it informally up to a certain level. So we can make sure the kids have the ability to type, which is what was happening in Djibouti, for instance. But then for some more specialized skills, we would need to partner. So for instance, we've had talks with Cisco Net Academy. We got Enrico to do that beautiful mapping of learning options. There's a probability that the next year and a half, we'll be trying to figure out what is best to support kids that works in a variety of contexts.
And I think as a note, which is important to say also, Peter, is that in many of these contexts, it can actually be a liability if you trace children. In migratory contexts or in humanitarian contexts, you don't always actually want to keep a trace, because if that falls in the wrong hands, it could be very detrimental to their safety. And so we try to figure out what works and what doesn't, but not necessarily by keeping track of individual kids' progress, unless it's obviously a possibility, but then it's still something that we need to develop further. We need to have a good system to, if it's possible, to do that.
Yeah, I can imagine if the ID is a security issue, then you give them only the first name and the name of their favorite animal or whatever. Something to keep track, which is more interesting than simply a number. And it also can empower them and give them some proud if they have a kind of a fake passport where they, with their picture and with all the accomplishments they made. There is a big poster in the Netherlands, for instance, 50 things you should have done before you become 12 years old. And that is really stimulating. Not all are.
So we're currently applying for a grant to do multiple labs on a migratory route. And one of the ideas is exactly that, is that if you were on that route as a young person, you walk into one of these facilities, you get to do some stuff, you learn, I don't know, how to mill something out with the shaper or something. And then you document that, and you go on with your family, and you end up in another facility that's the same, and you can log back on and you go like, hey, I see what I did before and I can continue that work. It's something that needs to be further developed, but yes, it's totally on the
that
radar.
could be a project on its own, that they master to collect little bit of pieces of documentation, in fact, or on whatever medium. Okay.
Yeah, it also helps the bigger picture as well, because right now you can learn stuff in a Fab Lab, but it doesn't translate to, for instance, employment. Because an employer is like, great, you tell me you know how to do this, how do I know? So supporting the admin side of it also helps people to get jobs and stuff like that. So it is 100% on the radar, but somewhat a challenge to get into place. We have options.
I think what's important also to not forget is that this is not necessarily about technical skills, right? So where we could of course document like, oh, you made a lampshade, or I hope you won't 3D print a Yoda, but if you did, it's still kind of cool. What's for also very important also is that there's sort of appreciation of themselves, that their view of who they are and who they can be improves and grows, right? And so that's not necessarily something you document. It's something we hope to be able to see and keep track of, but it's not something you put in a passport. It's something that is internalized, if you will.
Yeah, and that's also the reason for because the list of partners was really broad. It included the University of Geneva, but that's the reason for the University of Geneva as a partner, is to try to figure out beyond the concrete, what people get out of it. Yeah.
Could have been very simple. I have been soldering, and later they cannot explain to other people that it was soldering. But if you have that with a picture and with the word soldering, they always can say, once in my life, I have soldered something. Yeah. And that could also be that could be interesting if they come to in another location. Yeah. There are things that make you special, because that is the girl who has soldered sometime. Yeah.
Right. I think we have another question from Andrew Lamb. And people,
thanks, guys.
Unmute yourself if you want to say something.
Can you hear me okay?
Oh, there he is.
Hi.
Hi.
Hey.
Hi. I'm really glad to see this session taking place, and congratulations on the project, particularly in Djibouti, but all of the projects you're describing. I would like to participate in the session more, but unfortunately the schedules is a pain. We're actually looking at some of your work, Enrico, in the Open Know-How session right now. So I'm in the Open Know-How workshop looking at photographs of you doing things in the Open Know-How session, Enrico. My question is really about in the different contexts, perhaps starting with Djibouti, where you worked, what has been the reaction of the host, of the national governments, and what sort of engagement have you had with them? Thank you.
So basically, I think that goes back to the point about how you design the project. So Djibouti really has strong buy-in from the national government. One of the reasons was that the lab is located in the university. Another reason is that when COVID happened, it was a major priority for the government, and the Fab Lab developed innovative solutions to a national priority. It's also similarly the reason why, in Burkina, the lab that TDH supports, that Gildas helped to set up and partners with, is located in a provincial government office for the same reason. So it's really important to have national buy-in. It works better in some places than in others. So Djibouti worked very well. Severodonetsk didn't work so well because there was an overflow of aid at the time. So even though we set up universities like the Fab Lab in a university, the government was just like, we don't like humanitarians. It's not the best time in the world. We don't differentiate between projects. But in situations more like Djibouti, more like Burkina, it's possible to use a sensible design to make sure you get buy-in.
Any other questions? There's no such thing as a wrong question. Please feel free to speak up.
Hi, can people hear me? I'm in Malawi. Is there a nod that people can hear me? I can see everybody's faces and hear you. I came a little bit late into the talk. I did hear all of Jean-Michel's. It's really great to meet you all this way. I've been trying to build a engineering center with a connected makerspace and in Malawi, and I'm still trying to figure out siting, whether I try for a peri-urban area. I'm in Lilongwe in the capital, and there's plenty of rural in the capital too. And the idea being to make this makerspace sustainable is to have that connected engineering and can be carried over to the, to real projects that have, an income stream. And that's what I've been trying to work on. I have a broad range of background. I've been working with embedded systems for 20 years and embedded Linux open source. I came from Bell Labs in the early 80s and, down the hall from the creators of this infrastructure. And so I was in linguistics research at the time. Anyway, I find myself in Malawi trying to, create infrastructure because it's just not there. So I'm happy to meet everyone. I can agree with so much of what everyone says, and I'm looking forward to getting to know the community a little bit better. I feel new in the makerspace world, though I've done much of it over the years. So that's all I wanted to say. But thanks for all your work, and I'd love to help in any of your projects or get involved. I have 4 decades of tech experience, and I'm still going and have this drive. So thanks.
Oh, thanks to you.
I'm working on 2 projects in Tanzania, which, unless I got it wrong where you are, it's sort of neighbors.
Yes, I'm south.
Yeah, I know. So, I'd love to get in touch with you and see how we can help you with whatever resources we've developed, and in a sort of a similar geographical context, how we can share knowledge and what works and what doesn't in that sense. But thanks for sharing. That's awesome.
No, thank you. And when you mentioned Raspberry Pi, it's like I have the largest quantity of Raspberry Pis in Malawi. I'm certain. Yes, so it's and have been recently, very, very actively working on offline learning. And I just finished. The reason I was late was I just finished a proposal for expression of interest for online learning, and I've been focused on offline learning, and so somewhat interesting to design a blended methodology that I'm hoping is going to be effective. Who knows? That's the expectation.
So it's interesting that
that's actually. Oh, sorry. That's
Go ahead, Enrico.
I'm interested in. We are writing a proposal as well for Rwanda, and it's going to be about teaching health and care related skills. That it's a bit what I try to focus on. And a part is going to be local, so I'm hoping to actually stay there for a while and teach to students and practitioners, but the part is going to be online as well. So I'm curious to hear from your experience about that.
I would be happy to. I would be happy to talk about these things, because I think you know, the need is so clear, and the possibilities are there. It's not a matter of a dream. It's doable now. So I think it's mostly all about awareness and continuing to gather you know, possibilities of what's, you know, stay current on what's possible.
I find it interesting, and we've talked about this before, Ruta, is that in the Fab Lab world, which I've been in this community for what, 12 years or something now, and since the beginning we've been talking about mapping the outcome and mapping the results of all the things we do, and we still can't really do that well, but we all know that it works somehow. We believe in this stuff, and I think it's very similar in what we're trying to do with the resilience collectives. That for now we don't have really hard data on, like, okay, if you have this stuff in here, it makes the life of this number of children better because of X. But every time we do something like this, we see it. And so we do need to ramp up the effort of making sure that we document this in a more proper way. But I think a lot of the things we do, they go over such a long time span. They're 10-year investments. They're not you set up a Fab Lab and the next year everyone's happy. It's an investment in a community, and that's a long-term investment.
Yeah.
And we're not very good at keeping track of those because oil prices fluctuate every 2 years, so that's too tricky. Anyway.
Yeah, well, that's it. Like, also, to be honest, one of the things that's helpful is just to learn from each other. Like, education is a big thing for us, like, and it's getting steadily bigger. And the other thing is that there's a lot that we can't do just by ourselves, and we know it. So it seems to me like everybody who's working together, if we put our ideas together and exchange, we're more likely to get somewhere with it. So yeah, I'd be super interested in hearing what you're doing.
Hello, everybody.
We have about 8 more minutes if there's other people with questions.
Yes, hello. Can you all hear me?
Yes, Nico.
Yes.
Hi. Thank you, Jean-Michel and Ruta. Really inspiring talk. Sorry, I was also a little late jumping in here, but been super interested in this and in some of your work in the past. Enrico, also I know you, and FabLab, a few others here. So yeah, my name is Nico. I used to manage the Green Fab Lab in Barcelona, and now working at Wikifactory. Some of you may know the platform. It's a collaborative development platform. I'm super interested and have been for some while of Fab Labs and the humanitarian space, obviously, and I've had some experience working in Africa prior to my discovery of Fab Labs. So I'm really interested in the whole question of, you know, I guess Fab Labs as a sort of sustainable model, and I think that was mentioned quite a few times. And I guess that whole question did come up a little bit. Jean-Michel, you mentioned it with sort of, you know, appropriate technology. How are we sort of, I guess also, and I'm really interested in how this maybe worked in Djibouti and maybe in Gaza as well. But sort of how do we sort of gauge the sort of needs that some of the projects or the educational needs, especially of digital skills and digital education, STEAM education, for some of these very vulnerable populations. And I guess especially when we're talking migrant populations and populations at risk. So this is a really, yeah, I guess just a broad question, but real interest of mine is sort of how is the Fab Lab network in itself also providing a value to this. And I think the question of how to engage with other communities sort of outside of that particular context is I think super interesting, and obviously one of the revolutionary aspects that we have thanks to the web as well, now digital tools and open hardware and the such. So yeah, I'm just curious of how I guess this whole question of sort of really figuring out needs when working with these communities, and how that's come about in your respective labs and experiments there.
Could I go on a minor rant, if you don't mind? So I come from the humanitarian world, and I've been doing the humanitarian stuff for about 10 years now, which also explains why I can't share a screen. One of the things about the humanitarian world is that, like, as you probably know from what you did in Africa, is we assess needs to death often. But there's two problems with the assessments. The first is, does the assessment correspond to the solution that we actually have? And the answer is no, not always, sometimes hardly ever. But the second thing is, people's stated needs are often different from their actual needs. Do you know what I mean? Like what they would use if you put in front of them. So one of the things that I would like, so the first year and a half of the FabLab stuff has been, let's see if this works. Let's see if there's genuine interest on the part of the communities that we work in. There is, that's clear, like amazingly clear, more than I thought. But one of the other things when it comes to needs is that what we're talking about for the next round of tests is basically to try to make a menu of options that people can choose from in terms of education, in terms of like different skills, in terms of protection and stuff like that. And if we provide it, then we can also kind of see what people actually use to inform the next rounds. So the short of it is, me personally, we do need to know the needs, but there's a million assessments out there on behalf of organizations that probably can do it at wider scale than we can. What we're offering is something different in terms of solutions, and I hope that what we can do is learn continually to make our solutions continually better. So again, like I said, I'm sorry it's a rant, because it's also a rant specifically about humanitarian stuff that frustrates me. But
well, thank you for that. That's actually, I think, quite to the point, and really some of the, I mean, a big part of the question is, I guess, is also working with these structures and organizations that have set ways of doing things. I think there's an opportunity to do, well, certainly come up with very innovative and different ways.
So it's one of the reasons I wanted to create the Resilience Collective. Don't get me wrong, the work TDH is doing is amazing. The work IOM is doing is fantastic. But they are very big and old humanitarian organizations. And these are top-down, heavy, sometimes insanely fast, but often quite slow, hierarchical systems. And I wanted to see if we could build something that can work with all of these, but act sometimes a little bit more nimbly. And I think sometimes we kick people in the shins because they just don't like it, but I don't care. So for me, that's also something we can learn of the Fab Lab community and of maker community as a whole. Like if you want something, go and do it. Don't talk about it too much, but go out and make it happen. Andrew, I think you had something else.
I'm into that, Jean-Michel. Thanks, Nico, for the question. As you know, I'm a big fan of Wikifactory and work with you guys a lot. There's a real challenge with the way needs are determined at the moment in the humanitarian sector, and there's, it makes a lot of sense to me why Ruta is, everything Ruta said is correct. So why it is something you get worked up about, because in some ways it is what a lot of these assessments do is essentially feed the beast. Like they're about trying to kind of prove the need for why my organization needs to exist and why the products I already have in my supply chain are the things that people need. And I think one of the things that we can do as makers, and something we're doing in Syria at the moment, is essentially we don't know what the needs are. We don't know what we're going to make on any given day, but our engineers might go to a clinic with a bunch of tools. Yeah, sure, some 3D printers, why not? In the back of the car. Find the thing that needs, the broken pieces of equipment, and then fix them. So it's trying to reduce the gap between supply and demand as much as possible. by bringing in some of these rapid prototyping approaches, which are the skills that were being talked about earlier in the session that these Fab Labs can often inculcate, those innovation sort of creativity mindsets. But I think the thing I want to plug, if I may, is that over the course of the next year, and something I'd like to present it in Montreal next year, is that we have a project now with Humanitarian Open Street Map teams and with a group called Needs List, which is basically, Needs List is a platform, an app, where people can put the specific needs that they have right now, or organizations can put the needs that they have right now, and there's people on the ground collecting data, verifying the requests and so on, onto a platform, geographically located, and we're creating maps of local manufacturing capabilities, including Fab Labs, that can respond to those needs. So it's about trying to match supply and demand as much as possible. We've seen a lot of efforts similar to this in the COVID-19 response. The real challenge is how to integrate that into the rest of the aid sector. And I think to some extent, we're going to have to disrupt. And to some extent, we're going to have to kind of bring people along on the journey. And we're doing we're just about to launch an initiative. You can sign up to learn about it at localprocurement.org. Localprocurement.org is an attempt to try and help aid agencies learn how they can procure things from their local Fab Lab rather than from, mass producers in China. And it's going to be a long journey.
So Andrew, being mindful of the time, and these are obviously awesome efforts, and I hope we can collaborate on these things. But me, it makes sense if we keep setting up these spaces and you make sure there's infrastructure to link up people, then that's a no-brainer. Ruta, do you wanna wrap this up? We've past the hour.
So yeah, really quickly, the kind of match between Humanitarian and Fab Labs, honestly, it's not always easy in practice. You have to deal with people like me who don't know the first thing about technology. You have to deal with structures that are occasionally rigid. But the results are actually, they're kind of what we need, like where we need to go. Because what we're doing is putting power in the hands of the people that actually need the assistance. So I think there's a lot of potential with this, but it needs to be built. And in order to build it, we need your help. I think that's it, really, from me.
Perfect. There's a contact form on the resiliencecollective.org if you want to get in contact with a large organization. And Ruta and Enrico and me were here on the FabX platform. So if you have any ideas, even if you have, somewhat negative feedback, just bring it. We want to hear all of it.
Let me put it this way. We know there's problems. We know we can get better. So please send it over.
I'm used to now at Fab conferences now to say, okay, who's up for a beer? And then you go find a local bar and you have a drink. So that's not going to happen. But,
all the best conversation happen.
Just going to have it in your living room.
Oh, that's like where the magic happens. I'm almost tempted to go grab a beer and but anyway, next time. Next time.
Thanks very much. Looking forward to meeting you.
Likewise.
Meeting many of you.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining.
Yeah, thank you for a great conference. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you. Nico will be in contact. I have to send you an email.
Yeah, sure, Enrico. Anytime. It's good to see you.
It's good to see you too. Great. Cool.
Well, that was fun.
It's still going.
I know.
But it's cutting us off.
Who's bringing the beer?
We were hoping for
it's applied. You have to open your own fridge.
Yeah.
Distributed beer.
All right.
and we were all not all in the same time zone. Normally we're in the same time zone, but that's all.
Yeah.
I'll have an early
Now,
beer.
where
maybe
are you?
Great
Are you all?
pleasure.
Where are you all
Here, yeah, in
physically
Canada.
located?
Yeah.
I'm in
Jean-Michel, are you
France.
still in France?
In France?
Yeah, I'm just below Geneva. Okay, maybe Mont Blanc. Oh, not right. No, well, you can't see it almost.
So France. I'm next door in
Sorry.
Barcelona.
Barcelona, yeah.
Yeah, all right.
I'm in Milan.
Oh.
Yeah, we're in the right time zone for for the beer.
I'm in Canada. It's 2 in the afternoon. It's super early, but I don't care. I'll have a beer anyway.
Why not? Why not?
Beer for breakfast sounds like a very
Well,
Canadian thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where?
Yeah. Country of alcoholics.
And Jeffrey,
Where
you're
in
in
Canada are you?
Malawi?
Yes, I'm in Malawi, in the Longway central region. I've been there 4.5 years or so. I when I go back for visits, it's Western Mass, Northampton.
I lived in
I don't know if,
Massachusetts for 3 years.
where did you? Yeah, so I'm 2 hours west of Boston.
Okay, I lived
It
just
was on my last
outside of
visit.
Boston.
Oh, okay. It was my last visit back to the U.S. in November. I was in Boston visiting my daughter and discovered the Fab Foundation. Never was not aware of it prior. And,
I see.
because, I've been tinkering with Fab for probably all my professional life, but not in formal ways. More engineering, independent product design.
You
So
mentioned
my
Beyleh?
awareness of the greater. What's that?
You mentioned Bell Labs?
I was at Bell Labs in the 80s, when at the end of the heyday of Bell Labs, when it was Ritchie and Thompson and Kernahan all just down the hall, and Rob Pike from who's for Go. I learned I played a lot of Go at Bell Labs, but it was a great place when I was there. Being able to have conversations with Arno Penzias and Big Bang and very, very interesting. And working with linguists who are some of the smartest people I've ever met. But you feel so small at dinner parties if you're not a linguist. I was the guy that built the technology for the linguists to be able to do real-time audio in 1980 when there were no PCs. So I've been making
one of the things I often tell people, like, I have 3 young kids, 3 young sons, and I sometimes tell them, like, they might have the relationship with objects that I have with applications on my phone. And a lot of people have trouble believing that, but like that's the speed of technological advancement.
Well, I've watched it acutely for 45 years, and I mean since I was 17, and it's been an interesting ride to have that long perspective, but it's still fascinating to me when I think about a cell phone. The soup would have been the supercomputer, and unthinkable. But I've seen it happen, and that's why I feel so compelled to spread it. It's like, okay, it's going to make it will make things better. I came to Malawi to design connected healthcare for getting test results back to the 728 health ART clinics in the country, because it was being carried by motorcycle and paper, and still is to this day. And that was based on Raspberry Pis and Arduinos, the workstations. Affordable, sustainable, you know, and it's a shame. It's like, give me $1 million. I can do the whole country's healthcare for $1 million.
Yeah, if it only worked like that, right?
But it needs to work that way, because if no one else is providing it, it needs to be done that way. And I like what you said, Jean-Michel, about,
because now I'm gonna go on a rant against people like Zuckerberg and you know, stop me, because otherwise we're not gonna get out of this.
Well, it's either that or Facebook.
No, I know, but it's good. But it's good to meet all of you beyond the, you know, it was a nice small group, which is great. And I haven't done that many Zoom meetings despite COVID, because COVID's only starting here. No one believed it till we got a new government a few weeks ago, and then all of a sudden the realities came out and people are dying. You know, it's been an interesting you know, time to be in the world for all of us, right? But really nice meeting you guys, and I hope to stay in touch, because I think you know, I think there's a nice common thread in these.
Hello guys. Hi. Hello. From Nepal. It is 12 at night in Nepal. And yeah, thanks for the presentation today. And yeah, I hope you guys do like well for the Djibouti Fab Lab. And yeah, it was nice to hear about the things that you're trying to do there. So if you like,
where are you in Nepal, Fab?
Sorry?
Where are you in Nepal?
Currently I'm in Kathmandu. Have you been here?
Sadly, no, but the parents of my wife many times. They go every year. So I hope to join them one day.
Yeah, sure. Okay, please come back.
So, and what are you doing? Like, what are you doing with Fab Labs in Nepal?
So currently we're trying to, like, actually we had a plan to bring the Fab Lab in, the first Fab Lab in Nepal in this in 2020 May, but it was like postponed due to COVID, and is going to be brought in like 2021 January 2021. So I'm just getting to know much more about the environment, the community, and the works related to Fab Lab and how it has been sustained. So we are doing a couple of interviews as well over like different countries of how they have managed to sustain, or how they are trying to you know, if they are self-sustained or donor funded, or like several things like that. So currently we have interviewed just Fab Lab Philippines, and like they were also donor funded, as well as they were located in school, but as we are targeting in a kind of community-based place, so that people, it can be inclusive, and a lot of people, not only specific to schools, but other like artists or the entrepreneurs, SMEs, all people can come there. So we are trying to make like a community hub. So yeah, we are just in a verge of like doing the feasibility for the Fab Lab. So how we should like proceed for like a fund or a grant, or whether we can sustain or not. So yeah.
Stupid question, but you've talked to Gildas, right? From Waga Lab. Have you talked to the Burkina Faso Fab Lab, Waga Lab?
Philippines.
No, the Fab Lab in Ouagadougou, they're doing something similar, and it's really cool, and without donor funding. So I thought maybe it might be interesting to talk.
Nice.
Lab, I thought there was an effort to set up another Fab Lab in Kathmandu. Is there a second lab that you know of?
No. This is the lab that we're setting.
Talking about the same one. Okay.
Yeah, same one. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. Awesome. I think I'm gonna have to go soon because I'm joined by kids.
Okay.
I just
Uh,
a quick request.
Sorry.
I'd love to keep in
So
touch
I made
with some
you.
of you.
I made you host so I can leave. Take care of this.
You too.
Bye.
Hey, Ruta.
Great evening. Kids.
Bye bye.
Hey.
Hey, Palab, it's great to see you. Sorry,
Yeah,
this
great to
is
see
a
you too,
coincidence
Nico.
because we had a Zoom chat not long ago, and it's great to find
Yeah.
you here. It's amazing the
Yeah.
Fab world connecting us again.
Yeah, nice to see you, man.
So, Palab, you failed to mention, but Nepal Communitaire, who you work with, is doing some really fascinating projects also around disaster relief and humanitarian relief. And I think bringing the whole lab context into that is super interesting. You mentioned to me that last time some of your projects, and we know some of them already in the viral response, which have been hosting some projects on Wikifactory for hands-free handles and other sort of sanitation projects. So yeah, this was super cool. It was really inspiring to hear about your work.
Yeah. Thanks, Nico. Yeah, and yeah, it was very nice to know about the Wikifactory platform as well, like the details of the documentation and the the replicability of the things that were uploaded in there. So I had sort of like gone through different projects, and I wish to like make it in Nepal as well, but due to time limitations, I was unable to. So yeah. So we'll be sharing as soon as I have like some like other times, like a free time. But yeah, I'm sorry that I could not like have like upload all the things. But yeah, I will certainly do more.
Oh, no way, man. Your project's already like one of the featured project on the platform. So it's really cool. Yeah, it was amazing. Probably one of the best documented projects too. And which is I think a big prize for me, like those projects that are so well documented, and like it's just clear. You have like all of your bill of materials and dang, and so yeah,
already decently documented project is rare, so
right.
such amazing documentation is mind-blowing.
Totally. Yeah.
So sorry, Ruta, can you text me the name of the lab, because I cannot like document it. So like.
Oh sure. Let me just put it in the chat.
Yeah, I was curious about that one too. It's in Ouagadougou, right?
Yep. It's so basically, actually, it was really nice. TDH wanted to start a Fab Lab, and the team there got in touch with the local lab themselves. So they already had a connection by the time Jean-Michel and I were on board. And they're really like, they're a lab that's just never been, like they started, like FabLab, it's really similar to what you were saying. They self-funded, so they didn't get donor money. And they've been going for about 7 years now. And they've been doing like stuff that to me looks super interesting, but I mean, again, my level of understanding is zero, so. But like people come to the lab for fun projects like building planes, but also for more practical stuff like, I mean, making solar dryers by all means, but then there's also like, they made something to show when water filtration systems stop working and stuff like that. So yeah, it sounds like it's along the lines of what you want to do in terms of not being donor funded, being open to a wider community, stuff like that. And that's also the reason we partnered with them for the lab for artisanal gold mining in Burkina.
Yeah, that's
okay. So I'll try to connect with is Gillas Guila is the like director or?
Yep.
Okay.
He's just more francophone, but he does speak English. It's just a bit of a challenge.
Okay. So is there some mailing address or anything of him?
Do you know what? Let me just give you his email. Show this. Okay, sorry. And just let him know that
Okay.
that I put you in touch when I say hi.
So thank you so much. So it will be super helpful. Thanks.
And I'm curious, your collaboration also with OpenDot and the Djibouti lab. How did that start, or how did that? So that's.
I think it started with
Thanks
with
to
Enrico being
Jean-Michel.
nice and me being desperate.
No, so well, it was mainly Jean-Michel knowing my personal interest in the topic, and it was a great opportunity for me. So I really enjoyed to be involved in that. We are not officially part of you know, a more structured project, but I'm very happy to contribute and help when we can. And before that, we had a collaboration with David Dot. He was looking for a way to start to develop content that he could use in the project of using Fab Labs in humanitarian content contests. So he sponsored a Fab Academy scholarship to one of our students that actually work on the topic. And we developed a sort of kit that could be produced by a Fab Lab and used to train people in the Fab Lab. So all the part of the tools was all of this kit was used to have workshops and so on. So from that, we did a research on the kind of education that you can do, and we've been involved in the topic. But it's mainly my personal interest, to be honest, and the will to do something meaningful.
And then the thing is that, like, because I think the thing that people don't necessarily realize with humanitarians is that we're not very good at finding resources outside of our own sphere. So, like, it's not easy to get in touch with us, and we're not very good at, like, responding ever. So it was really, this has been really nice for me, and also for others. And I'm hoping that what the Resilience Collective can do is facilitate more of these links, because then other people can start at least experimenting with different things.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I guess it's a little bit part of the drive that we're starting to do at Wikifactory, in a way, as a sort of online collaborative platform. It's been going for about 2 years now, sort of alpha version. Now it's sort of developed and had some couple of upgrades. But apart from the sort of technical features that the platform provides, as I mean, at least for projects, that's very specifically centered for projects that want to collaborate on hardware, hardware-related files and 3D models, and to be able to collaborate not only remotely but also within teams. There's a big educational aspect to that. And we're discovering that really through a community of users who are using it in all sorts of different spaces, from obviously the more specific Fab Lab centered ones around robotics and CNCs and machines and drones. But really, it was really fascinating to see it. I mean, currently, and not only in Wikifactory, obviously, but this broader collaboration around the COVID response, and really in a lot of other sort of quite surprising areas. But for me, it does come back to education a lot of the time, and I think it's something that we're also, well, I guess in a way, really trying to explore through a platform that is really has kind of collaboration as its central feature. It's a sort of an idea. I think a lot of the online platforms are centered around sort of dropping files in, and then someone else picks it up, and you work on it locally. But having somewhere where you can collaborate online, and I think I really connected with, having moved around a lot myself. But Jean-Michel mentioned it briefly. Like you're sort of, you can be in one lab, you can work on it in somewhere else, and so ultimately that shareability of the bits and projects related to that, I think is something that's becoming more and more interesting to me.
Yeah, we just need to get people to actually do it, because that's it. Like, that's the reason why we started developing the idea of the labs around youth on the move. Was like, I mean, it's kind of funny looking at things. So I'm looking at things from a somewhat different perspective, I guess. But if you take a look at most of the other outcomes of the Fab Lab, like education or employment or whatever, at least theoretically, a lot could be done. You could reach a lot of people more cheaply without a Fab Lab. Theoretically. Practically, okay, there's like 100 million miles of problems, but in theory. But the thing is that one of the things that Fab Labs has that nothing else has is that capacity to let you kind of work with other people, pick up in other places, like to try to work collaboratively, like you said. We're not making full use of it now, but.
Totally, and cross borders, I think that's somewhere in a world that's becoming more and more segregated, I feel, or sometimes cut off from each other, or at least the mobility we take for granted in our richer parts of the world isn't as taken for granted elsewhere. So I think that ability to connect, and definitely that collaboration, that's why I guess I was just boiling back to my original, I went on a bit of a rant myself, excuse me, but the original, I guess, question of how you guys were collaborating between, OpenDot as a lab and also the Djibouti lab, and I guess the network in itself for me is just one of the richest resources out there that Fab Labs really have, because it doesn't really, at least my learning curve, even managing a Fab Lab, is that you can have the most sophisticated machines and tools in the world, but really without that network, they're nothing. Well, you can do things for sure. You can make all sorts of things, but it's really without that possibility to connect and see what others are doing and learn and, build on other projects and, and appropriate and really use things in a different way because your context is different and because your environment requires a different, input sometimes. So, anyway, that's, sorry for that rant.
It's a good rant.
Hello, everyone. Sorry, I missed a big part of the speech, but I was here like 20 minutes ago.
So where are you from?
Where are you calling in from?
Actually, I'm from Paris. I'm in Paris. I study computational architecture at the school here, called Design by Data. It's an advanced master, and I'm recently pretty much into Fab Labs and the social impact that they have and everything. And so my supervisor recommended me to join this event and extend knowledge of how they work. Earlier, I was I get to know them only from the books and from web pages. This is one of the first encounters that I have from people that have actually done it. And it was amazing for me because you've done it in a part of the world that there aren't really great opportunities for people. So I think your work had a huge, I was glad to see it.
With which Fab Lab are you in contact with in Paris?
Sorry,
With which Fab Lab are you working with in Paris, or are you in contact with?
I'm in contact with Volumes. and also with a Fab Lab at our school called Makerspace, which is at École de Pont. But Makerspace is currently closed because our school is closed because of Corona. But I'm in touch with Williams at Paris at the 19th.
Well, they organize an amazing response for COVID-19. Were you part of it?
No, I joined them after that, but I see a part of what they did for that. But it was very well organized and awesome. It was really good.
We worked together with them at the beginning of the year, organizing a hackathon about disability.
Oh, nice.
It was very nice to be there. Cool. Good.
Okay.
So we could have an email with all the contacts, I guess. What do you think?
That would be great.
That would be fantastic, yeah.
Okay, guys, I got to go. It is already like 1:12 at night.
Thanks for staying up until midnight.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Good night, guys, and thank you for the presentation, and thank you for the contact as well.
No worries. Give me a shout if I can help at all.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Nico. Nice to talk to you again. Yeah, we'll be talking later.
We'll be in touch for sure.
Yeah.
Great to meet and catch up in after our chat as well with everyone. So thank you. And yeah, I hope to meet in person definitely at some point down the line. And I hope really maybe somehow winds can conspire. I can visit the Djibouti lab. That would be incredible.
Fingers crossed.
And many of these other incredible initiatives. So
that would be
okay, guys.
Okay.
Good night.
I'm off too.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Enrico.
See you soon.
Speak to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
I just, Enrico, if I can ask you something, Enrico and Ruta, I'm really interested to, I'm envisioning to in the future be able to open a Fab Lab. I've not decided where still, but I was very much thinking of underdeveloped countries, because I've always loved the idea of helping people in other parts that don't have access to high level knowledge or universities. So I always had liked the idea, but honestly speaking, I don't know where to start and what to do to in some years, or I don't know, in some time, I will be able to experience these Fab Labs, which are different than European Fab Labs, or be able to do something maybe one day.
I'm sure you will. So, I mean, maybe the first thing would just be to keep an eye on the Resilience Collective, because at a certain point, I think one of the ways we're hoping to start connecting people, what we're starting to do is, what we want to do is to start connecting people. So I think, yeah, so I think that's it really, because honestly, I think everybody getting into this is somewhat chance, right? I got into this completely randomly, so I
also think that it would be nice for people to have the opportunity to volunteer, because it was really an amazing experience to me. So many things I learned in 1 week, and are not things that you can read on books or learn from others. It's really understanding and go over stereotypes. I mean, both good and bad stereotypes, is really to understand. We spoke a lot about this, and I think it would be great. So as a resilience initiative, Jean-Michel is coming back
Hey, Jean-Michel.
You went to pick up the beer.
Yeah.
There it is. Belgium one, I guess.
Yeah.
So that was it. Who is here with us?
Hello, my name is Berat. I'm a student at École de Pont in Paris, and I'm really interested in FabLabs.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Where do you study in Paris?
École de Pont.
Okay. I don't know the school, but I'm not far from you.
Oh, nice.
I'm between Grenoble and Chambéry.
To work in a humanitarian fab lab, where to start from?
I was thinking to keep an eye.
Depends where you want to go, I guess. I mean, a lot of the labs have their very specific context. I mean, the humanitarian labs are not just, some are in conflict, very poor areas, some are, you know, focusing on migrants, but around that there's actually quite rich communities. There's all sorts. It's not a fixed thing or something.
Oh, well, when I get to my supervisor, like to actually the person who's responsible for masters, Francesco Cingolani, you might know him. Like I told him that I'm really interested in like I told him that I've been to some cities, like in all, I've been to some universities for some summer schools, for some education, and my initial idea, which was like very naive, was to think of 2 or 3 Fab Labs that like initiated at the first time in different continents, on different cities, with different levels of let's say like with different level of equipment, and these Fab Labs, each of them work with the universities that are located in those cities, and like be able to benefit from the research that is being done there. For example, what I had in mind, like at the École de Pont, we have Navier, a laboratory which is like doing a lot of great research on the fabrication friendly of complex geometries. Like for example, like let's say we're talking about the place where for example an earthquake or something has happened, and we're going to do something there. We're going to make tents or make some temporary habitants, and we need some geometry that we can fabricate very quickly. And for example, we know that some research has been done at Navier that allows us, for example, to create a very like a funicular form that will function as a sort of emergency tent, or for where doctors can operate. And it can be done very quickly because we've experimented already in the laboratory of a university. But and the research is published as well. But like having this is what I had in my. It might not make sense, of course. Having Fab Labs that are in touch with these universities, but in the other parts of the world, like necessarily we don't need this to happen in Paris. Like we wouldn't need some such thing to happen in Paris, maybe. But maybe, for example, as you were presenting Djibouti, maybe we need that to happen there, or for example in another country, I don't know, Iraq or Syria or anywhere else. I was thinking of like 2 or 3 Fab Labs that are working with universities very closely, and like trying to make this research available to really like real case scenarios, to natural disasters when they happen, or generally more general, with a more general intent to make people able to participate in the creation of, I don't know, for example, their residentials using 3D printing, for example, in the part of the world when like we are able to use mud or like use some sort of substances to do it quickly, and like we can't take a very expensive equipment for construction there, and we can't manage that financially. Like we can benefit from 3D printing. These were the things that are happening in my mind, and when I told my supervisor, when I told Francesco about it, he said, "You should go to Fabrics Live and you should see all the people." Like, this is what happened.
Is like I have a thought or two, but like maybe just kind of, but just please take them also as sketchy thoughts. Kind of like, so it seems to me like, because the type of Fab Labs that we're looking at doing in the TDH, in the Resilience Collective, was kind of more about making sure that people can develop their own solutions. So it's not so much big scale, it's small scale, and it's trying to help people kind of develop solutions, skills, communities, stuff like that. Part of the reason for this is that the problem with a lot of concrete humanitarian action, like setting up tents and food and stuff like that, it's not that the stuff isn't there. It's just the bureaucracy, admin, and supply chain to get it from point A to point B. So it's not that, well, maybe some additional technical solutions could optimize things, but the big problem in humanitarianism, it's not the tech, it's the admin. So the thing is that I know that like Field Ready is working more on this, and it is interesting stuff they do. But maybe one thing to think about is like what you're looking to achieve and what the problem in the sector is, because there is space for Fab Labs definitely in technical solutions, but it needs to be accompanied with like, nah, WFP, you're being an idiot for doing what you're doing, or the UN might not be working correctly. There's space for social empowerment as well, and that's kind of more what we're doing, and it's a bit more free, if you can say that. But those are my 2 cents for whatever it's worth. But no matter what, it's like, it's nice, like the interest is nice. Just even the fact that that you're interested in it and want to do something, that's kind of amazing. So
I was wondering, but that your English is too good for you to be French. Where are you from originally?
I'm originally from Iran.
From Iran? Okay.
I was figuring, you've got an amazing country. Do you want to set up a Fab Lab there? They need a Fab Lab.
Ruta knows it.
Well, yeah, it's a great country, but at the moment its economy is like in a disastrous situation. So,
well, I think, Bedada, and I applaud you for wanting to jump into this stuff and really do, continue to explore what you can bring. And I think that these technological solutions are very important. But as Ruta said, as a more global perspective, we used to have humanitarian situations of different scales. In the worst scale, we would have a few and then they'd go away, and then there would be other ones. And now we sort of constantly have a few of them that don't go away anymore, and there's only more coming. And I don't want to be the pessimistic guy in the group, but like it's not going to get much better soon. So we're going to have all sorts of issues. And I think what we're trying to do is not necessarily say, what can we bring to people that is going to help them, but what can we give to people as knowledge and sort of tools for themselves that they can figure out a solution. Because we're really not going to be able to help everyone if we just send UN planes. There are planes from the UN filled with tents and food, and they're standing on tarmacs right now. And if someone at the UN, the right person, snaps his fingers, they're going to take off and they're going to land where they're most needed. But as soon as the plane is empty and the people have eaten the food, you need to send another plane. And so I'm not saying this is bad. I mean, this obviously is needed and it's very important. But I think what we're trying to look at is can we find more durable solutions, not only in the context of war situations and famine, but just in general, like how can people be more communicating and more, you know, working together on finding local solutions? And that's the premise of the whole Fab Lab thing anyway. I mean, right, Enrico? This is where we're coming from in a way. It's like
no, and one point is also the method. So beside technology, you have how to engage with people and how to create a community locally, how to understand what the real need is, how to co-design a solution. And all these things are things that are not related to technology per se. And they can have a great impact. So I understand your approach, and maybe you're also one of the person involved in the reflow projects. Is that possible? With Francesco?
You're on mute,
you're muted,
I'm not involved in that project.
Because I know he was incubating some ideas, and one I thought it was similar to yours. So these big projects develop new solutions that can be useful or not, but it's definitely the mindset and the connections and also being very humble, I guess, because it's a quite common approach to get there and say, I know what you need. but of course it's a very bad one.
Well, honestly, like, but so one of, like, because I was in Iran for about 1.5 years, right, working on working on Afghans, if that makes sense. Sounds like a really weird thing to say, but like going back to what Jean-Michel was saying, like the Afghan problem's been going on for 40 years. Bucket loads of like planes, blah, 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 has been sent. But one of the most interesting things of all, and it's what you see in Iran in particular, is Afghans just make their own way. Do you know what I mean? Like in different corners of Tehran and in different corners of like Kerman, they start their own businesses. They might not be legal, they might not be this, they might not be that, but they actually develop their own things. And and so some of the most useful things you can do for people in conflict is actually just to say, what is it that you're doing, and can we help you to do it better? Like, that was my one success in Iran. We helped Afghan businesses and I was very happy about it. So it's also personal pride, don't get me wrong. But it's just a question of like, if you start there, it might be easier.
And like other thing that I had in mind, like, was the earthquake that happened. I forgot that. I think it was 1.5 years ago in the west of Iran, in Kermanshah, and like there were many problems regarding like providing people with places to stay, like temporary residential solutions, let's say. And yeah, it was a big part of it was because of very poor organization, true, but also a great part of it, I think.
Yeah.
Also, we can think of, besides that, of course, which is very important, we can also think of more like faster solutions, like when we were in winter and an earthquake has happened in a very like poor and hardly accessible part in any country. I think maybe it's not, it's my guess, maybe it's not the best approach to send an airplane with bunch of tents there. I mean, maybe this is not the quickest thing to do.
But actually, that's where I think what Enrico said, I think you might have missed the actual talk. But Enrico, what you said about Djibouti was interesting, because exactly what you said about Djibouti 100% applies to Kermanshah. I know because like I also know some of the people working on that response. it's parallel. So yeah, I don't know, Enrico, do you want to restate?
Well, yeah, the interesting experience to me was really about small logistic and organization, and things that could be, much more expensive even in a matter of time compared to other situations. And at the same time, on the people we were working with, I felt that the level of connection and the common background was higher than expected. So it was easy to engage them and make them enthusiastic about technologies and what we were doing, even without have to worry about, a different cultural backgrounds. But I don't know, of course, the context in Iran, so I don't know what you, Ruta, were referring to exactly.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, that was me going off on one, sorry. But the thing is that like logistics of equipment to Kermanshah is really hard. So if it's hard for basics like tents that don't get ruined that much, it's so much harder for like proper like equipment that's sensitive. Electricity, not easy. So it's like, the thing is, it's actually the little things that create the problems with that. And the little things are potentially even bigger for a Fab Lab than they are for cloth tents. Thing is, but that doesn't, like, if you manage to get over something in a stable state, right? Like if you have a Fab Lab in Djibouti that makes things regularly, or if you have a Fab Lab in Burkina that makes things regularly, then it can adjust what it does in response to the crisis. And that's what happened in Djibouti, and that's why I'm proud of it. But starting it up in response to the crisis,